all of you would have met people who have lived lives that's different from yours, that might be longer than yours, or something that you could not have imagined, and you're really hoping to share that story because you believe that it would impact society or the people around you for the better. But when it comes to all these kind of things, what really is documentary storytelling? And for me, documentary storytelling is about doing justice to the stories told through empathetic narratives. Now, you'll notice here that I use both the terms stories and narratives in the same sentence. And you might find that weird because these terms are used in the mainstream media and dialogue pretty interchangeably, but they're actually two different things. Stories itself is pretty much something that you might have learned in primary, secondary school, right? Your 5W, 1H. It is a matter of fact kind of thing where you're talking about the who, the what, where has it happened, when, and of course the why and the how. Narratives, on the other hand, is how you tell that story. So a story itself is a narrative, but a story can have more than one narrative. For instance, there's more than one narrative of Mulan, but one story of Mulan. There's more than one narrative of Singapore, but there's one story of Singapore. And for the stories and for the stories that you all are trying to do justice to, there are multiple narratives. And the fact that you are trying to tell more stories is most likely because of the fact that you feel like there's a gap in the current discourse, that you believe that with your narrative, it would be able to fill in that particular gap. Now, why empathetic narrative? Well, that simply points to where I believe documentary is at its most powerful, which is essentially being able to tell stories in a way that conveys feelings and therefore understanding. We've always wanted to be able to, tell people to walk around in someone's shoes, understand how they feel. But the problem is that if you do not know how the shoe fits, you're never going to be able to take that journey. And I think documentary as a format has the ability to teach people how the shoe fits so that they can continue on with that journey. And that process is very intimate and very powerful. And I think ultimately does the world a whole lot of good. But there are a few key principles if you want to embark in documentary storytelling, or if you just want to do, I think, storytelling that is worthwhile. And essentially, it's these three things. The very first thing, I think, goes without saying, but needs repeating an emphasis, which is integrity. When you turn on a documentary or you watch a documentary, there's an innate trust that whatever is shown on the film is true, or at least true to the point that it's defensible in court. It is the same relationship you have with a cook. When you order your Hokkien mee or whatever you do in your hawker center, the food that comes out, you have this trust with the person serving the food that it will not give you food poisoning. And if you have food poisoning, well, then you're never going to visit that store again. And that is sometimes threatened in documentaries because this entire workshop is called Storytelling for Social Impact. But people may kind of measure impact differently. And sometimes people feel like there is a dilemma or conundrum when it comes to stretching the truth just a little bit for it to be a bit more finesse, give it a bit more flair in terms of story, and thereby making the story less true, but quote unquote more impactful. Based on my experience and based on the people I've talked to, it is a very tempting thing to do, but ultimately, in the course of time, it will always be a net negative. Because what happens is that the moment trust is eroded, it is so hard to get it back. And not only is the impact created by the work put into question, the entire documentary medium as a whole would come into question as well. So these questionable things would never do justice to the stories that's being told. So that's number one. Number two is actually brevity. Now, brevity is basically being able to tell something as short as it should be. For some of you who have made videos or have worked with clients before, there will always be a time where how long is the video? Can the video be 5 minutes? Can the video be 2 minutes? 30 minutes. I don't think people have the attention span for it. Yes, we do recognize that time is one of the most important resources of our audience because it's one thing that we can never get back. But how long a work should be is, to be honest, pretty much dependent on the subject matter itself. Some things require 1 or 2 minutes. Some things require half an hour or 1 hour. It is up to you as the storyteller to determine if you can do justice to the particular time that you have kind of promised the audience to sit through to make it all worthwhile. And it is actually pretty difficult because now you start to get to kind of the difficulties of making a documentary or telling a story. Because for instance, if you have something like For Sama, which is something that spans across multiple years with many different kind of social, political kind of aspects, how are you going to cram it all in 1.5, 2 hours and yet do justice to the story? And that is where we go to our third point, which is creativity. The quote that I'll share later at the end, I'm going to bring it forward over here, is that one of the most common sayings when it comes to documentary is that documentary is the creative treatment of actuality. So we are creatively showcasing different aspects of what has happened in reality for the benefit or the engagement of our audience. If you take creativity away, but you leave integrity up there, what essentially you're getting is basically security footage, right? Because if you think about it, security footage is a one-to-one representation of what has happened in real life, but it's never going to be engaging. So it's never going to have the social impact that you desire. Because while it may be true, and to be honest, that might be put into question depending on where you place the security camera, it is not brief enough for people to be able to accept it. And the only way you can have brevity is through creativity. So I'm going to bring an example over here, which is one of the films that I've done called A Sunny Past. Now, I've heard that some of you would have seen this film because it was sent out in the email prior. But if you have not, it's basically a very simple story on Sunny, who both his parents have dementia. And when the mother had dementia, he decided that one of the things he discovered sporadically was that by talking about his kampong life, he was able to reconnect with his mother, because despite the fact that dementia has taken away much of the recent memory, the earlier memories were still very fresh in her mind, and he used this kind of as a bonding moment. But what ended up happening was, because he was an artist by trade, he started to ask around his own neighborhood for photos and albums, and his artwork essentially became the cure for a community level dementia, because everyone had bits and pieces of the kampong, but nobody has ever placed it together. And this is where I'm coming at, whereby if you look at this diagram, it's just so this one big circle is essentially the full possibility of what Sunny's story could be. And this entire production took around 9 days because there was a competition that I was trying to also gun for. So I went in there 2 weeks on the first day and talked to Sunny and his wife Libby to kind of understand what were their motivations, why were they doing this, to get some of a basic understanding. And this ended up being these circles that you see. There's no way that I could have gotten the full picture. But I'm just trying to get as many of these kind of big circles to be able to kind of sense what I might look at going into production itself. And when I'm going to production and I start to embed myself, talk a lot more, sometimes with the camera, sometimes without, links begin to appear. Some of the noise begin to dissipate. And then a narrative begins to form, something that I believe that I have, with my current ability, can be able to realize this narrative fully. And it is through this that the production will be done, and then I'll head over into post-production, where I begin to put in the pieces of the beginning, middle, and end within this particular episode, of which I was with them for 9 days. Now, I was very fortunate enough that when I met them, that particular week was also the week where he was about to launch his graphic book, which is the culmination of 2 years of work spreading across maybe 100 different accounts from all of his various kampong friends and family. And you're talking about people who are for some reason really old and yet really sharp in the mind. For instance, Sunny, I think when we were shooting this last year, he was around 65, 66. And yet I got to meet his primary school teacher, who honestly, for some strange reason, looks younger than him. So I'm not too sure what they put in the kampong waters, but a lot of them live until they are really old. So I talk to them, I kind of get as many information as I can so that I can put this narrative together, that ultimately when they see it, there's like, even though this person is not from our kampong, has only been with us for an X number of days, he has done justice to the story that's being presented forward. And to be honest, that is the greatest joy for me, because not many people know about this particular event. And now, especially with COVID, this was meant to be a roving tour around Singapore in 2020. But now, currently, as it stands, it kind of lives just through this documentary. And sometimes that is the power of video, especially because you not only get to monumentalize something, but I think through video, sometimes you are able to also encapsulate the experience that neither words nor pictures can do justice to. It's that video and audio combination that really, I think, seals in the experience. At least until we get to the point whereby we are able to use like holograms and all that, then probably that might be a lot more immersive.